Hi guys, this is an anonymous group from Thread Spec during the math project. Our group members are Siman, Junzan, Randon, Jingshun, and me, Wei Xiang.
The graph shows the preference of hot, cold, dry, and watery food for the upper secondary students, lower secondary students, and parents. For upper secondary students, most students preferred cold food as the data shows that 11 students chose hot food, 14 students chose cold food, 7 students chose dry food, and 8 students chose watery food. Thus, we can conclude that most upper secondary school students preferred cold foods. For lower secondary school students, most students preferred cold food as the data show that 7 students chose hot food, 12 students chose cold food, 10 students chose dry food, 11 chose watery food. So we can conclude that most lower secondary students chose cold food.
For staff, most of the staff prefer cold food as the data shows 1 staff member chose hot food, 3 staff members chose cold food, 1 staff member chose watery food, and no staff members chose dry food. Thus, we can conclude that most staff members prefer cold food. For parents, most of the parents prefer as the data shows that 4 parents chose hot food, 1 parent chose watery food, and no parents chose dry and cold foods. Thus, we can conclude that most parents prefer hot food.
The graph shows the preference for food of drink for the upper secondary, lower secondary, staff, and parents. For upper secondary students, most students prefer drinks as the data shows that 14 students chose food and 26 students chose drinks. This shows that drinks are the preferred choice amongst upper secondary students. For lower secondary students, most students prefer drinks as the data shows that 18 students chose food and 22 students chose drinks. Thus, we can conclude that drinks are more popular among lower secondary students. For staff members, there are more people who prefer food as the data shows that 3 staff members chose food and 2 staff members chose drinks. We can conclude that staff members prefer food over drinks. For parents, most parents chose food as the data shows that 4 parents chose food and 1 parent chose drinks. Thus, we can conclude that the most parents prefer food.
This graph shows the preference of texture of food for upper secondary students, lower secondary students, staffs, and parents. For the upper secondary students, most students prefer chewy food as the graph shows that 20 students chose chewy food, 11 students chose soft food, and 9 students chose crunchy food. Thus, we can conclude that most students prefer chewy food for upper secondary students. For lower secondary students, most students prefer soft food as the graph shows that 11 students chose soft food, 13 students chose crunchy food, and 9 students chose chewy food. Thus, we can conclude that most students prefer soft food for lower secondary students. For the staff, most staff chose crunchy and soft chewy food as the graph shows that 2 staff chose crunchy food, 2 staff chose chewy food, and 1 staff chose soft food. Thus, we can conclude that most staff choose chewy and crunchy food. For the parents, most parents chose chewy food as the graph shows that 4 parents chose chewy food, 1 parent chose soft food, and no parents chose crunchy food. Thus, we can conclude that most parents choose chewy food.
The graph shows the opinions if $1 is a reasonable price from the upper secondary, lower secondary students, staffs, and parents. For upper secondary students, all of the students surveyed, 40 students finds that $1 is a reasonable price. For the lower secondary students, of the students surveyed, 40 students finds that $1 is a reasonable price. For the staffs, of the staff surveyed, 5 staffs finds that $1 is a reasonable price.
For all the parents surveyed, 5 parents find that $1 is a reasonable price. Thus, we can conclude that $1 is definitely a reasonable price.
Thank you for your attention and have a nice day.